I'm very concerned about the turn towards authoritarianism in various places around the world. I mean, Trump, you can never tell if he's joking or not, but when he's making moves that wouldn't be out of place were he planning to try and seize power.
Well, joining me now is Jimmy Wales, who's the founder of Wikipedia, who has just put some of his thoughts about what he calls the most essential superpower of today, trust, into a new book. Hello to you.
Hello.
And in the interest of trust, I should say we are friends. So,
Yeah.
so I do know.
Yes.
Now, how important is trust to Wikipedia, the world's biggest source of knowledge?
Yeah, so of course Wikipedia is really founded on trust. I mean, we let anyone come and join the community and start editing. So that's a very trusting, sort of opening gambit for Wikipedia. And, we find people do generally live up to that trust. Most people who come to edit, even if they're brand new, they're just trying to help out, doing something good. Obviously, we have to deal with people who aren't there to build an encyclopedia. And then, of course, we've always wanted to be trusted. And so, what are the things that we've had to do to make sure that Wikipedia is as good as we can possibly make it, even though, of course, it's never going to be perfect. So thinking about trust and working on how to improve trust has been a real key part of my work.
And why did you want to embark on having an online encyclopedia? I mean, there were lots of libraries with lots of books, Encyclopedia Britannica.
Well, I mean, I was watching the growth of free software, open source software, and seeing programmers coming together to collaborate in new ways. And I realized that kind of collaboration could be beyond, just software into all kinds of cultural works. And I've always loved encyclopedias and yes, the idea of, and this was sort of in the middle of the dot-com boom when, most people, the first time you heard the internet, you're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I can talk to people all over the world and we can share knowledge and it's amazing. And then during that boom, there's a lot of pop-up ads and dog food companies and all this. And I thought, how about we just do what the internet's for, which is share knowledge. So to me, it was a perfect fit to try to harness the power of the internet to bring people together to make something.
I mean, you started in 2001, but it's worth just talking about the scale of Wikipedia. I mean, how big is it compared to what's gone before other encyclopedias?
Yeah, I mean, it's enormous. We're in over 300 languages. We've got, tens of billions of page views every month. We think around 2 to 2.5 billion devices use Wikipedia every month. So we're really global, and we're part of the infrastructure of the world, and it's just amazing to me even now. Like everyone knows Wikipedia. So.
And yet there's no editorial control.
Well, there is editorial control, but it's the volunteer community, and so it's a very distributed system. We have all kinds of mechanisms in the community, like we have the admins who are elected by the community, and then there's the arbitration committee who deal with more complicated disputes and things like that. So it is a complicated social system. So sometimes people have the view of it's like millions of people each adding one sentence each, but really it's small group collaboration. It's people who are really into bridges, who are part of Wiki Project Bridges, and they go through all the articles about bridges and say, how can we make those better?
And they are just donating their time.
They're just donating their time. They're having fun. They're volunteers, yeah.
And so you've got 7 million articles in English.
Yeah.
And yet there's no overall editorial control. I mean,
there's no editor-in-chief.
Nobody checks them.
Yeah, no editor-in-chief. Well, the community checks them. I mean, we do have people who are very experienced community members, and they're constantly monitoring and reviewing and discussing and all of that. Because if we didn't have any system at all, and it was just like a big random message board, you really wouldn't expect it to become anything more than a lot of ranting. So.
And no one's making any money out of this?
No. I mean, we're a charity, nonprofit organization, we exist largely from the small donations. We have some major donors, but really 90+% of the money comes from people, chipping in their 20 quid or whatever. It's pretty amazing.
And how important do you think it is that you're not for profit in terms of?
I think it's fairly important. I think it is really important that we are supported by, donations from the general public rather than, say, funded by governments, because then you're vulnerable to their pressures. It's really important that the volunteers, are in control. They have intellectual independence. So yeah, I think it's quite key.
And it also means that you are one of the figures up there with the other founders of tech. But you're the only one who's not a billionaire.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We've been on holiday together as friends, and you've seen it's a pretty normal life. Yeah.
But they, to a certain extent, a lot of them seem to have turned dark.
Yeah. No, I mean it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm a little sympathetic. I mean, when I saw all of them standing on stage, with Donald Trump at the inauguration, I thought a few of them looked like hostages. Like I don't think it's not like they're actually Trump supporters, but they're just trying to make their way through and navigate through a very complicated situation. I think they shouldn't have done that, but here we are.
I mean, they've also turned on you to a certain extent. Elon Musk talks about Wikipedia.
Oh yeah. Elon's he's been on a bit of a campaign. But I mean, the thing that is interesting is, when he calls us Wikipedia, well, it just isn't true. So, that broadly, the idea that Wikipedia has been hijacked by left-wing lunatics is just not true. If you want to say, does Wikipedia have certain areas where we should work harder on being neutral and not biased? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's something we always have to grapple with.
What would you think of when you talk about that?
I mean, there's all kinds of things. I mean, when we're looking at questions around Israel and Gaza. I mean, a war's been going on and a real tragedy, and it's really hard to sort of see through all the fog and all of that. I think we have to say, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's take a look at these entries. Are there things we can do to improve? Some of that is going to, there's such a flux of what's going on from day to day and so forth that hopefully if the peace holds, there'll be a time for more of a historical reflection on what's happened.
But I mean, you believe, as I understand it, that there is a truth, that there's some things that, are just factually correct.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you are grappling with a murky situation with claims and counterclaims, sometimes the best you can do, and I mean, I think journalism is in the same situation, is fairly characterize what those claims are and don't be suckered by, propaganda and this and that. It's not easy, and I think that's always going to be true.
But isn't the problem now, as we're seeing in the United States where you're from, that people in power actually want to erode that notion of there being absolute truth?
I mean, definitely. I mean, I do think there is a real undermining of the very idea of journalism, of truth, sort of undermining trust in the media, underlying trust in institutions, is always a tactic of the strongman leader. Because, it's problematic if you've got journalists picking away at you, telling people what you're doing, and you feel much more comfortable as an authoritarian if they'll just parrot party line. I mean, this is not new to this era, it's not new to the Wikipedia world, but it is something that we're all having to grapple with, for sure.
Because, I mean, some people, I suppose, would say free information, that of itself is a quite a liberal idea.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Kind of, but it's also a classical liberal idea, which, the Republicans used to care a lot about, the sort of founding fathers and First Amendment and that kind of thing. And so, it's not a lefty idea. It's fundamentally a very American idea to say we need a free press and a healthy, rich dialogue in society to be able to make better decisions. So, and I still think that there are elements of the right in the U.S. who are still very passionate about that sort of thing.
But when you get a president of the United States elected who clearly contradicts himself or denies that he said things that we can all play tapes of him saying,
it's an astonishing situation. I mean, we are in an era where, and I think this is part of the reason I think trust is so important, and part of it is I want to say to the public, like, it's really important that we insist that our politicians be trustworthy. You know, if you've got a politician who not only contradicts themselves or whatever, which always can happen to anybody in public life, and it's all very confusing sometimes, but who clearly contradicts themselves and doesn't give one fig for whether it's true or not, whether they.
I mean, you may think it's important, but clearly the majority of the electorate don't.
I think they do, but I think they have felt other things are somehow more important, and I think that's a mistake. You know, in this country, I think it's. I'm not the first person to say, you know, in the most recent election, it wasn't so much that Labour won as that the Tories lost because they had lost trust. Because I think maybe not for everybody, but for a lot of people, that picture of the Queen sitting all alone at the funeral, and then we find out the night before they were having a party in Downing Street, that was a pretty bad blow. That was like, we can't trust you guys. Like, this is completely ridiculous.
But do you think that, you know, perhaps inadvertently, Wikipedia has contributed to the loss of trust because of entropy, because there's so much information out there, people don't know where to look?
I hope not. But I mean, I do think if you've got people who are saying, okay, like we are trying to be as factual as possible, trying to be as neutral as possible. Of course, we don't always get it right. That's just part of the, you know, it's hard work. And you've got a rise of, you know, all kinds of low quality nonsense out there on social media and this, that, and the other. It's hard to say we're part of the problem, right? We're actually countering the problem and fighting the problem as hard as we can. But of course, broadly, you know, we have to say, like, the social media algorithms, which tend to promote content that's about conflict and, you know, divisiveness and so forth, that can be a real problem.
And you don't deny that social media in particular, but I suppose that has led to a polarization.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's been a real key part of it. You know, when you have, and in many cases, I think these side effects, they aren't intentional necessarily, but if you have an algorithm that shows you more of what you appear to like, it can definitely then therefore lead you down a rabbit hole of you're only listening to people you agree with and they're telling you new things and you're not even hearing the other side. And if the algorithm is promoting the content that gets the most engagement, which can also mean the most outrageous and the most, you know, shocking content, then yeah, it definitely can contribute to polarization. I mean, it's very rare to see, you know, something go wildly viral on Twitter, for example, X, as we are supposed to call it now, that is like, you know, hold on everybody, like let's think about this situation a little more. This is complicated and nuanced. That doesn't go viral. What goes viral is giving somebody a whack and a clever pun and, you know, a jab. And that's partly just human nature, right? Because some of that is organic, but some of it is actually in the algorithms to say like, oh, this is getting attention, let's promote it more widely. And it's, you know, it isn't great. It isn't. Do
you think there's anything that can be done about it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, you know, I think that the social media companies, although they don't seem to be moving in this direction, they need to be very mindful that, you know, if your short-term interest is causing people to actually hate your product, you know, I think most of us, you're on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, I use it less than I used to. A lot of people use Twitter because for professional reasons it's important, but also we all kind of hate it, you know, you kind of like, there was that initial sort of fun of like, wow, like anybody can respond to me, that's kind of cool, and you can interact with. Now you're like, I feel like I'm talking to robots who hate me. You know, I feel like the trolls are louder and louder, and you know, it's quite difficult for people. Some people are able to take that, and other people in the public eye are just like, this is horrible.
But I mean, there is a problem of market dominance. You've had your own idea for a social media operation. We've had other things like Blue Sky and all that, and they basically can't compete, can they?
Well, I'm not so sure. I mean, I think, you know, Blue Sky and Threads are growing and doing okay. I mean, I do think we've seen in the past, you know, MySpace looked super dominant for a while and now it's completely gone. And Facebook was completely dominant, but now, at least in terms of how we talk about the impact on the public dialogue and discourse, it's sort of Twitter and so forth. So I think these things can move on, and I do think that if they're unhealthy. And if quality people are like, I don't really want to participate there, then they just become a cesspool.
But the danger, and presumably, not one that Wikipedia is so widely spread, but potential is that you get communities who simply reinforce each other on closed systems, which is why it's got.
No, and there used to be this concern back in the era when blogs were the big thing everybody was talking about, and there was a concern of like, oh, people are only reading blogs they agree with and so forth. But I thought, it didn't seem so bad then, because a lot of blogs were long-form pieces arguing with other blogs, which were also long-form pieces, and that was a discourse and a dialogue that was useful. Now, actually, so I don't know the extent to which this is true, but there is a view out there that as Twitter has become more right-wing, maybe Blue Sky's become more left-wing. That's not great either. Like, that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, if one group of people is over here talking, the other group over here talking, okay, maybe we should talk to each other. That's really important.
Now, let's look at some of your rules, because your book is the 7 Rules of Trust. I should say, it says on the flap of your book that you're known as the good guy of tech, but here you've got one saying, we teach toddlers civility, remember why, and practice what we preach. I mean, fond hope, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know what? I think most people do get that, and I think part of what gives me optimism is, despite all the breakdown of trust in these public spaces we've been discussing, most ordinary people, they realize like most people are perfectly nice, and we do behave ourselves in sensible ways in public. I mean, an example I've been thinking about just yesterday is, people go to McDonald's and they eat their meal, and then at the end, they put their trash in the bin and they put the tray on the counter, and nobody's making you do that. Like that's a social norm that people are like, yeah, it's like the proper thing to do. And random people do that all day, every day, and that's great. And that's like normal life.
Every city also has a litter problem.
Every city also has a litter problem. Yeah, exactly. I mean, certainly if you listen to some of the tech bros in the U.S., London has become a lawless hellhole, but actually it's a very nice city. So, of course, there's always problems around the edges and things like that. But we also say, gee, actually litter on the street, like people frown on that. They say like, I mean, what kind of jerk just throws their trash on the street? We think that's a bad thing.
Another thing you talk about, which may surprise people, bearing in mind that we're talking about something which happens online in Wikipedia, is you say trust is won and lost in person-to-person contact. Yet many people see the internet as depersonalizing.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely can be, right? So that piece of advice, be personal, really applies to, if you're thinking about in a business situation or maybe a politics situation, is, tell the story of Airbnb, who had this enormous trust crisis. And part of that was because they were looking at big picture numbers of like, well, only a tiny percentage of these problems are going to crop up. But what happened was somebody's apartment got trashed by a bad guest, and they didn't really deal with it well, and it caused them a huge PR crisis, which could have been averted if they had said, yeah, well, it's going to be a small percentage, but wow, we need to think about that person and what would that experience feel like to them, because this woman who blogged about what happened to her, it was very raw and emotional, and people were like, whoa, like that sounds terrible. And they realized they had this sort of, moment of eureka, that unless they could fix this problem, then landlords, owners of properties would never trust to put them on Airbnb, because, well, you put it on there and maybe it's going to get trashed. So they had to reformulate the entire business to think about trust and put it really central. And of course, Airbnb's gone on to be this huge
And how
success.
did they do that?
They did a lot of things. They started requiring IDs, in order to rent a place. You have to upload your ID and prove you are who you say you are. That seems pretty obvious. If you're going to let somebody in your home, they shouldn't be anonymous. That sounds quite dangerous. They gave insurance, indemnity to renters, to people, to say if somebody trashes your house, we're going to make good. Oh, okay, that's good. That helps to build trust. So it's all those little details that really make a huge difference.
Yeah, on Wikipedia you got in the other direction, because you tried something called Newpedia first,
yeah.
I think, where you went through the credentials of the people posting material, and it just became too cumbersome.
Yeah. Every context matters. You know, like one of the problems there was like the original system of Newpedia was not trusting at all. It just said like, oh, who are you? You've got to prove you're qualified and so on and so forth. Where it turns out, you know, what was more important is what I call accountability rather than gatekeeping. And it's one thing to say, you know, somebody comes to Wikipedia, they're new, they make a bad edit, it gets reverted instantly, they get a warning, maybe they get blocked. No big deal. Like, we just fix it and move on. It's very different from letting someone into your home, right? Where, like, hold on a second, I need to be a little more careful.
Yeah, there are still a lot of people, ironic really, that you written a book called The 7 Rules of Trust, who just say we can't trust Wikipedia.
Yeah, of course. And then we're the first to say, you know, at the top of an entry, you'll read, you know, the neutrality of this article has been disputed, or the following section doesn't cite any sources. And, you know, I'm the first to say, like, yeah, be careful. Like, obviously, the way the system works, it's pretty good. Like, we all use it, and, you know, we know it's pretty good. But you always have to sort of say, okay, but wait a second. Like,
I mean, people
careful.
would still be shy of saying, you know, I read that on Wikipedia, or citing Wikipedia as a source, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, today I feel like they're often not shy enough. You know, I always say we weren't as bad as they used to think, and we aren't as good as they now think we are, right? We know there are problems in Wikipedia. We know there's errors. We know there's things that could be improved, and that's all part of the process.
But I mean, you've got people like, you know, the comedian commentator Stephen Colbert, who, as we know, has fallen out with Donald Trump, but he's fallen out with you as well. I mean, he
oh no, his
comedy
character,
wikiality.
Yeah. His comedy character was, you know, making fun of Wikipedia. He actually privately, he's a big fan, like he loves Wikipedia, and you know, he was being a right-wing blowhard was kind of his character. But yeah, you know, he you know, one of the funny things that happened is he said, look, you can change, and you know, he said something about the population of elephants, and he told people to go on and change it, and of course the page got locked immediately, and you know, and yeah, he said, how did that happen? How did you protect against that? I'm like, well, the Wikipedia community also watches your show, so people saw it and immediately like, whoa, hold on, let's lock that. So,
and have people gone after you on your own site on Wikipedia?
Oh, of course, yeah. There's always something going on. There's always noise. It's not. Wikipedia is not a very welcoming environment for trolls. So
why?
People will, well, because you know, if you go in and you vandalize Wikipedia, it gets reverted very quickly. You get a warning, you get blocked, and then it's all over. You don't get attention, you don't go viral, you don't whatever. Whereas, you know, in social media platforms, you can have an attack at somebody, and if you're good at it and, you know, sort of particularly vicious or particularly funny or whatever talent you might have there, you can get huge on Twitter and maybe even become the president.
I mean, there are also professional media organizations that are operating PR, trying to change the entries about a corporation or a person in Wikipedia, and also in some cases trying to make them disappear.
Yeah.
How do you fight that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most important thing is with Wikipedia, all the editing is transparent, everything's open, there's a community monitoring everything. And you can't sort of sneak in and do something. People say, oh, what are you doing? Why did you delete that criticism section? And then you have to enter into the debate, and you need to have sources and all of that. And so while people do come in and sort of clumsily try to do this, most like reputable PR companies realize like actually that doesn't work, like actually it just gets you in trouble.
But I've seen in the EU you've actually got a legal right to disappear. How do you do that? You know, you're
Yeah, it doesn't really come up. We haven't had that problem directly. We do know that some links to Wikipedia have been removed from search engines because of that, which we think is.
You don't get legal challenges saying take down that I was sent to prison for something.
No. Yeah, because the EU sort of right to be forgotten is. It's not ideal the way it's worked, but it does, you know, if it's newsworthy and if it's in an encyclopedia and we've got sources, you can't make us take it down. I mean, we would just refuse. I mean, and then we would have a real legal battle on our hands, but we haven't really had much trouble.
You seem to have surprisingly few legal battles.
Yeah, I mean, not many. There are some. I mean, for example, we were blocked in Turkey for about 3 years, and we fought in the courts in Turkey until we won in the Supreme Court in Turkey, which I'm quite proud of.
China?
China, we are currently blocked in China, and we haven't compromised. There's a standing offer from China that we can open in China anytime we want if we let a university there manage to make sure all the content is legal in China, and we're like, yeah, no, thank you.
Now, what about IP? You're a free site, and so you're accessing, a lot of material all the time. I mean, are you therefore undermining and destroying, the legitimate IP of journalism and experts in academia?
I don't think so, no. I mean, like one of the really important principles that's very important to defend is that facts aren't copyrightable. The unique expression of facts, of course, are, but the facts themselves can be written, and as long as it's in your own words, you can say facts. Because if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to use scientific knowledge without paying commission to the publisher and all that sort of thing. And we're really big, strong believers in references, in attribution, and saying, where did you get the information? So the list of sources at the bottom is super important, and gives traffic back. I mean, one of the problems with AI and large language models is they're not very good at attributing sources. Like the way the technology works, the model may know something, but it often has no idea why it knows that. It doesn't keep track of that. And they're working on that, and hopefully that'll get better. But, the idea that you can pull from many different sources, learn something, write a synthesis explaining a topic, that's really fundamental to the growth of knowledge and free expression, and it's always been part of it.
So how do you think that people's intellectual property can be protected? Because clearly there's an argument between Silicon Valley on the one hand and the EU, Brussels on the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think the existing regime works pretty well. I think there are new emerging issues around AI reuse of content, and I mean, we're going to see a lot of interesting things happen there. The thing I'm worried about there is moving down a path that says, no, you can't use these facts unless you pay a fee, because that just literally is incoherent. It makes no sense. It means, as a journalist, you can't report on science.
I mean, you've been critical of some of the plans of this government in this country.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had, this is not about copyright and intellectual property, but the Online Safety Bill, Online Safety Act, is potentially very problematic for Wikipedia because it doesn't envision a system like Wikipedia. It envisions a system where staff moderators are doing this, that, and the other. It would impose new obligations that don't make sense. So, for example, if in social media, two people get into a quarrel and one person blocks the other person, then there's an obligation that they don't see each other's content. But at Wikipedia, we're working together, collaborating, and so a troll could come in and say, I'll block everybody who disagrees with me, and now they can no longer participate on editing this article. Hold on, that doesn't sound good. That wouldn't work for us. So we're talking to Ofcom. We had a legal case which, basically ended that it was premature. The judge basically said, I'm not a lawyer, so in my words, the judge basically said, nothing bad has actually happened to you yet. You probably have a good case if this does happen to you, but Ofcom hasn't ruled in that way. So, okay, we wait for Ofcom until they do something stupid. So.
You've already mentioned AI. Is there a possibility that AI will simply destroy Wikipedia because people will just go on their search engine and the information will be there and they won't bother go to Wikipedia anymore?
I mean, it's a concern. So far, we haven't seen that impact at all. And one of the issues with AI right now is that issue of trust. Like, AI makes stuff up, sometimes really hallucinates. Yeah. So, for example, I often ask every new AI model I encounter, I test it by asking, who is Kate Garvey, who's my wife, and she's not a famous person, but she's known a bit, and so it thinks it knows, and it just makes stuff up, and it's always plausible. It once said she set up a charity with Nick Clegg's wife, which is amusing but not true. And then I always ask, who did she marry? Because that's also funny. My favorite is when it said she married Peter Mandelson, which, and then I said, isn't Peter Mandelson quite famously gay? And then it got very woke with me and said, it's not appropriate to speculate about people's sex lives. So.
Yeah, and conversely, couldn't it contaminate Wikipedia that people start
Well,
using AI to write entries and.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we're really, really focused on thinking about and all that. I mean, part of what the protection is, we do require sources, reliable sources. And so if you just get some hallucinated information from an AI and put it into Wikipedia and there's no source, then people are going to challenge that, and that's not appropriate. On the other hand, I do worry about, more broadly, the sources we use becoming contaminated. And so if you think about the number of low quality media sources that are out there that are probably struggling financially and very tempted to use AI to supplement, we may begin to see, a lot of, not in the mainstream, not in the big proper media where they are fact checking and there are rules and proper journalists, but are we going to get more and more noise in the world that is misleading? Particularly one of the dangers of the hallucinations of AI is that it doesn't hallucinate things. If I said, where was Adam Bolton born, it isn't going to say Mars, right? It's going to say, somewhere in England. That might be right, or it might have some reason to think that. And it could be wrong, but it's plausible. So as a human looking at it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, even though it doesn't. And so I think we do have to think a lot about that, like the integrity of the overall information ecosystem.
Conversely, you also say that you think that you can use AI at Wikipedia to improve your accountability in your checking system.
Yeah,
How does that work?
I think there's some of the things that AI is reasonably good at, that we should think about and harness. Like we could become just, we're old-fashioned, we write it ourselves, we hate AI, and we're not going to look at it at all. One of the things so I talk about this in the book, so we're very, very transparent. So if you want to know why does a particular article say something in a certain way, you'll often find on the talk page, 50 pages of discussion of that. And so yeah, of course you could spend 4 hours reading that 50 pages, but that's not easy. Could an AI summarize that and say, well, look, here's the main arguments that the community has put forward, here's the people who said this and that side, and this is how the conclusion was reached. Oh, that sounds useful to me as a Wikipedia editor who I hear, oh, they're having a big fight about poodles over on the dog page. Oh, okay, what's going on here? And I go in and it's like, oh my God, they've been talking for days and days and days. Tell me quickly what's happening here. That could be very useful. So we should use tools in that way. Other things would be like have an AI that's scanning over Wikipedia entries, particularly smaller ones, and say, look, oh, here's an entry. It has 5 sources, so it's not very big. Is there anything in these sources that should be in Wikipedia but isn't? Or is there anything in Wikipedia that's not supported by the sources? And if it can make useful suggestions to the community, we wouldn't let it edit Wikipedia directly, but if it could be, even 70% of the time, it's like, oh yeah, that's a good solution, and 30% of the time you're like, nah, that's not actually good. Oh, that sounds useful. It can make us more productive. It can sort of take away some of the sort of more tedious work that's not that value adding, and really save human labor for those really more interesting judgment calls.
I think it's fair to say you're an optimist.
I am,
exactly.
A pathological optimist, I always say. So
you also say in the book, you quote Joni Mitchell saying, we need to know what we've got before we lose it.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And, when we see, like many people, I'm very concerned about the turn towards authoritarianism in various places around the world. I mean, Trump, you can never tell if he's joking or not, but, when he's making moves that wouldn't be out of place were he planning to try and seize power, that's scary. And I think we need to be really serious and thoughtful about saying, hold on a minute, like actually a bipartisan democracy where we make compromises and we can move forward in some ways has actually worked pretty well. It's obviously a mess in certain ways, a democracy always is. But let's not give that up because a charismatic strongman manages to get enough.
I mean, one of your lines is you actually say that we have to be careful that the murder of Joe Cox is not a straw in the wind of the coming storm. And
yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, when we see, the rise of political violence. I mean, we've just seen this horrible assassination of Charlie Kirk, who I would have many, many disagreements with him politically. But what was Charlie Kirk doing? He was talking to people. He was campaigning. He was putting his ideas into the world, and he was actually quite famously willing to debate people. He was willing to go into a conversation. Wow.
Did you ever debate him?
I never did. No, never met him. I don't sort of get involved in political debates like that. So, but no, amazing.
And I mean, what do you think is the likelihood? I mean, the library in Alexandria burnt down in the end. That you're dealing in knowledge, which is, if you like, the source for intelligence, but it's not the intelligence. Some people think artificial intelligence, the information sort of superhighway, as it used to be called, is just going to overwhelm us. What do you think the chance of that is?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we go through these phases, and I think people really do, like ordinary people, they want to know, they want to understand the world, they want to be given correct information. They're also often vulnerable to hype and propaganda and this, that, and the other, but there is that core returning to people don't want to be lied to, and therefore I think we'll see a real return to people saying, you know what, I don't really want a lot of nonsense from social media. I want to watch Adam Bolton tell me some facts.
And you don't think there's a chance that the singularity will happen and the machines will decide that they don't need us?
I'm not so concerned about it, but I'm not an expert. All I can say about that is when you have real experts, people like Demis Hassabis of DeepMind, saying we need to be really careful here. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, if Demis says that, I think we should be really careful. But at least right now, I mean, one of the things that I use AI a lot, and I'm working with things, and I'm testing, and I'm writing scripts and doing projects, and it's really not that good. Like when you first sit down to use it, you're just blown away. Like, oh my God, it can understand what I'm saying. It can answer me. You dig a little deeper and you realize, oh, it is really just a probabilistic thing that mimics human speech. It doesn't understand anything. It gets very confused very easily. You're like, well, it's not about to take over the world. I mean, we're far from that. Who knows what the future holds?
We can look it up in Wikipedia. Jimmy Wales, thank you very much.
Thank you.